Is Elden Ring inaccessible?
Alright, what's going on, guys? For people that have been around in the Souls community for a long time, know that there is one thing that has persisted ever since the very first game, and that is the conversation around difficulty and accessibility in the Souls games. And it's a topic that we've covered numerous times here on the channel, but there's
The people that get into this shit, I cannot believe it. Like, yes, Elden Ring and Dark Souls are hard games, but they're not that hard.
something different about the article that we're going to cover today, because I saw the headline of this article and I thought it was just going to be another basic one about an easy mode.
You know, Elden Ring and Dark Souls should have difficulty options, of course.
But I believe it opens up a lot of interesting questions that we in the Souls community do need to ask ourselves. But what really got me was a take from another game developer about this article that quite literally blew my mind, and not in a good way. So we're going to break all this down today and try to figure out if the Souls games are not accessible enough and need difficulty options. But as we get into all that today, you guys know I'm chasing down 100k subs here on the channel. So if you're new around here, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. We cover all things.
Yeah, this guy does really good videos. Like, you should definitely subscribe to him if you like watching like From Software, like Dark Souls, Elden Ring type content. This guy's tons of videos about it.
Elden Ring and From Software, and during the wait for Elden Ring DLC, there's a lot going on that you're not going to want to miss. But with all that out of the way, let's go ahead and get into this article. The piece in question that we're going to be taking a look at today is Elden Ring and Souls games should have difficulty options. The time has come for the Souls franchise to become more accessible. And this is from DualShockers. Now, normally when I cover these types of articles, I tend to just roast them out the gate, but the discussion around accessibility specifically has grown a lot recently. So I want to take this at
I think the discussion around accessibility growing is around actual accessibility, like controller options for people that are paralyzed. Like, we're not really talking about accessibility as in making games easier. It's just people having better options for, you know, doing things whenever they're like disabled in some way.
Merits and see if we can be convinced. So let's go ahead and get into it. Money unsurely spent. When I consider buying games, in this case Elden Ring and Dark Souls, many factors go into my decision. I look at what reviewers are saying and I try to gauge the game's levels of accessibility. For those who might not know, I was born with one arm, so when it comes to purchasing games, I need to know if I can play them first. While I'm not against learning opponent strategies and movements, I am against being unable to choose my adventure's difficulty, especially when it comes to my first playthrough. So right off the bat, one thing I do want to commend about this article is that it is actually written by somebody with a disability.
This is not, that's actually good, because a lot of times people talk about accessibility and it's because like they play the game for an hour and they can't kill the tree sentinel because it's their first Souls game ever, and then they go and rage write an article about it.
Times when we get these articles about difficulty, they're written by people who aren't disabled on behalf of others who might be, and it makes it overall very disingenuous.
It is.
But having one arm is very much something that's going to inhibit your ability to play games. My first question though would be, why is difficulty the automatic solution? This sounds like an issue with personal movement and functionality. So
somebody needs to tell this guy about Comet Azer.
To me, the solution that I see would be a controller that you can use with one hand. Now, granted, I'm not a disabled person, but I think the exact problem is something they should address. Why is the logic not to supplement that lack of movement? I'm not sure I totally see the connection with difficulty here, but that's just my initial thoughts. Let's go ahead and keep reading.
I think the amount of times that you have to like move around and everything does make it more accessible. Like, yeah, sure. But you're right. The way to solve this problem is not to just make games, like, as a default, easier for everyone. It's more to, like, give those people different tools to solve the problem. Which I personally think that Elden Ring is probably the most... Like, there are so many things that you can do in Elden Ring that will make your character more powerful in a boss fight or in the game in general, that I actually think that Elden Ring is simultaneously... Like, I wouldn't say it's the hardest, because I think Sekiro is, like, just by default the hardest. But it's the second hardest From Software game ever, and it is also the easiest From Software game ever. Like, it is both, depending on how you choose to play it.
On the type of game I normally play on medium at first. On medium difficulty, games present a nice amount of challenge for me. I do not feel my progress as being badly hindered, and I do not feel like I threw my $70 away. But when I play a game like Elden Ring or Dark Souls, I can't help but feel defeated. Not just in the sense of losing a fight, but as if the series is not made for me. There's a real sense of feeling left out. And I mean this in the most respectful way possible, but they're absolutely correct. The series wasn't made for them. Not to be insensitive here, but the game was made for people with two arms, which is likely 99.9% of their base. But let's go ahead and be
true. I mean, that is true. Like, you can't, absolutely.
Totally honest here. These games are not that hard. Elden Ring offers a numerous amount of ways to make the game easier, aside from a standard difficulty slider. As soon as you get to the first area, you can summon another player to help you on your journey, which dramatically decreases the difficulty of the game. There already are difficulty options in this game. Heck, I just saw an article yesterday of somebody who made a spirit summon that can solo all the bosses. Not to mention you can go and farm runes and get over leveled with no limit. So anytime I see this conversation come up and they don't mention those things, you automatically know they don't actually mean it. And even
it's not that they don't actually mean it, it's that they beat their head against the wall against it for like maybe a few hours, and then they never tried to solve the problem. They just want the game to change because they're not looking at solving problems.
Recently, there's been a spur of people doing challenge runs on Elden Ring, setting up control schemes that utilize other parts of the body like the feet, the mouth, even using their voice to control their character, and all of them beat the game. So once again, I mean this in the most respectful and sensitive way, but if you have a physical disability that limits you from grasping the controller, I would look into alternative controlling methods, and not expect the game to change for you. And not to mention,
I think that's very true. There's a lot of people that it's like everybody in the world is going to come at something from a slightly different perspective, and you can never design anything to where every single type of person, regardless of like what their ailment is going to have the same chance at it. It's just not realistic.
And that overcoming that physical limitation with a new control style would allow you to play every game better, not just Elden Ring. But let's keep reading. I am playing a game by myself, and how I choose to play does not make another person's achievements on a harder difficulty any lesser. It does not hinder the developer's vision because I
do think that it does to an extent, because like with a lot of games, people take it as like a rite of passage that they were able to like complete a certain game or beat something. And I think that adding a difficulty slider to that makes it less important. It absolutely. And this is like, I'm not saying it's a good thing this is the case, but I'm saying this is the case.
Others are playing on hard mode. There will always be those who welcome an immediate challenge. I am someone who prefers to build up to challenge. I have not played Cuphead in months because I get frustrated to the point where I do not want to play anymore. Now this right here is the standard easy mode argument that we've heard numerous times before.
I have two arms.
And every time it's brought up, we know that it does not hold water. And the main reason for that is that the initial statement they put in that paragraph is immediately untrue. So people are never going to be happy. But the main thing that this argument doesn't address when it comes to the Souls games is that the main selling point of these games is satisfaction through overcoming challenge. And one of the primary factors that creates that satisfaction,
I think that is true, but I also think the games are just fundamentally very good. Like, it's not even about the challenge. Like, I kind of like it because the reason why I like a game like Elden Ring so much is that Elden Ring asks you to get the number 4, and it doesn't matter if you do 2 + 2, 3 + 1, or 5 - 1, or any other variation. All you have to do is get to that number 4. And the amount of dynamic problem solving that you can have to do that makes it interesting. I think that's what makes it super fun, is because whenever you accomplish something in the game, it's either because you've created a strategy or you've realized some sort of strategy, and that makes you better at the game and better at doing it. Absolutely.
is value through scarcity, and the only way that works is if the challenge has a standard. And since everybody is different, it's up to you to figure out how you can overcome that challenge. And that's the way it's always been with these games. That's why they're RPGs. That's why the story is so abstract, is because it's not the primary reason you play these games. Overall, I think it's really disingenuous and honestly extremely unfair to reduce a game's entire accessibility to simply a difficulty slider. But in order to understand this idea further, here, I want to show you guys a response to this article by another game developer. In a comment to the tweet that posted this article, somebody said, accessibility options absolutely, things like colorblind options, one-handed modes, audio cues and such are great. Difficulty options are unnecessary for these games for so many reasons, not least of which is that the games make their own difficulty, especially Elden Ring. And I absolutely agree with that. But then we see a response from Ian Hamilton here who says, everything you listed is a difficulty option. That's literally why they exist. Now, I didn't understand that at first, and I'll
Wait, colorblind mode is a difficulty option? What?
I'll explain why in a minute, but look at the continuation of this thread. To that tweet, somebody else responded, no, those only alter how you interact with the game. Difficulty options are much more often how much damage an enemy does, how much you deal, and how much can it take. Audio cues and color correction don't change how much everything punches for.
That's true.
Which again, I tend to agree with, and I think most people would, because when we think of difficulty sliders, that's typically what they change. Things like how much damage enemies deal, how much HP they have, and how fast they are. I would say the vast majority of the time when you change it,
I think that yes, for difficulty in video games, that is primarily what you're talking about. Like 9 times out of 10.
Difficulty of the game, that's what gets altered. But y'all gotta see this. This guy explains that he's a longtime accessibility developer, working on games like The Last of Us 2 and on the Xbox Adaptive Controller. And if you go to his page, the pinned tweet is a definition of difficulty that quite honestly blew my mind. Difficulty equals capability versus barrier. Disability equals mismatched interaction between capability and barrier. Accessibility equals avoiding unnecessary mismatch between capability and barrier. Now, I want to think about this for a minute. According to this equation, it implies that any one player's subjective capability determines the difficulty of the game. So effectively basing the accessibility and difficulty arguments not on the vast majority of players that are going to be playing a game, but on the outliers in capability, which personally, in the most respectful way, I find to be ridiculous. I simply don't understand.
Yeah, there's always going to be somebody that, and here's what I think he's trying to say. So, if you are mentally capable of being able to beat a boss, but the barrier is that you only have one hand, so the solution to that is you make a controller that you can use with one hand. Do you see what I'm saying? So, like, it's basically giving people other ways to use the tools that exist in the game, which I think makes perfect sense. Sure. Yeah, get foot pedals or something like that, yeah.
Disrespectful way, I find to be ridiculous. I simply don't understand how that can be the paradigm for accessibility in the gaming industry when we're talking about video games. I mean, unless I'm missing something major here, by that standard, it sounds impossible to make a game accessible. Now,
I think what he means is that a person has the capability of being able to beat a boss, but because of their disability, like they are mentally and like they have the mental acuity, they have the knowledge of the fight, they have everything that they need to beat the boss. They're just missing some form of like physical augmentation to allow them to input the commands. And that's what the barrier is the physical input. So I think if you look at it from that angle, then yes, that's very true. Skill issue? No. Why would it be a... Wait, what? Yeah, no. What do you mean? Yeah, it's not a skill issue at all. It's fundamentally not a skill issue.
I think the confusion between these arguments is coming from is that the traditional idea of difficulty places that difficulty on the character within the game, therefore altering factors that would affect your character, while the developer here is seeing difficulty as the barriers that affect the player, which I don't believe is possible to address within the game, because there is always going to be somebody less capable, so how far are we going to take it? And I'll give you an example of what I mean. This developer says he worked on The Last of Us 2.
I think the solution is to make tools that allow people to function on the same level that a person who is completely able-bodied can function at. That's really what the solution is.
Accessibility options in The Last of Us 2
it doesn't make
was that
doesn't
players
make
had
the
the
game
option
easier.
to completely skip puzzles. You would literally remove portions of the game as an accessibility option. So are we going to apply that same logic to the Souls games? Or are we going to give players the option to skip bosses? Because when this conversation comes up, bosses are the most inaccessible part of the Souls games.
Well, I think for The Last of Us, I think it's not that big of a deal to let people skip puzzles for The Last of Us, because people don't really play that. Like, my understanding is that this is mainly a visual novel that has gameplay features. People love the story of the game. The story is the main character, not the gameplay. Whereas in Elden Ring, the gameplay is the main character and the story is just kind of an overlay that some people understand.
According to these journalists and developers. Now, I don't want to sit here and be an alarmist. I do think there's a conversation to be had, but I want to leave my conclusion with this thought. Does a game have to be for everybody? Part of that equation was capability versus barrier. So at what point do we stop tearing down the barriers and instead focus on building up the capability? I'll leave that up to you guys in the comments. But anyways though, that's going to pretty much do it for the video today. I just wanted to have this discussion because the Souls games are always kind of the ones that get kicked by these journalists and developers.
Oh yeah, and like the reality is, like, I bet you could play the Souls games a lot easier with one hand than something like Dance Dance Revolution. Or some other game that's like one of these rhythm games, some kind of crazy shit like that. That's going to be way, way harder to play if you're talking about doing it with like one hand or like with no tools. Yeah, Guitar Hero.
As being inaccessible, when time and time again they're the highest rated games that people absolutely love. But if you were to read some of these articles...
I think that if somebody is complaining about one of these games, I wish that it was like a law that if you complain about Elden Ring or Dark Souls or something like that, you have to post the unedited raw footage of you playing the game. I think that should be required.
Comments by these developers, you'd think they're nothing more than exclusive and oppressive, and I just don't think that's fair. But anyways, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like on it and subscribe if you're new around here. The 1-year anniversary of Elden Ring is just around the corner, and I think there might be something big that happens on that day. So I will see you in the next one.
Oh yeah, that is coming soon, isn't it? Holy shit, I can't even imagine that. Still a killer beat the game with one hand. Yeah, but like that guy's like one of the best like Dark Souls. I remember he was one of the best Dark Souls 3 players, right? So it's not really a big surprise. But yeah, I mean, it's already been a year. Yeah, I know. It's crazy, right? Like, what the fuck? So yeah, I mean, I think that for a lot of these games, like, you can't make a game that has like super challenging like mechanics if you have to design it that, you know, somebody can only use like 2 or 3 inputs at the same time. Like, I don't think you should expect that every single game has to be played by a person with one hand. That's such a massive limitation. And then also, like, what about somebody who's blind? What about somebody who's deaf? What about somebody who is X, Y, and Z at the same time? Like, this is like an endless problem-solving session that just you always lose at the end of. So yeah, I mean, I don't think that's the solution. I think that the solution is to build better technology to allow those people to function as if they were able-bodied. I don't think the solution to that is to just make the game easier. Like, give people different types of controllers. Give people different types of, you know, like I don't know, like, yeah, VR or something like that. I don't know. You link the video? Yeah, I'll link it again just so you guys can see. Yeah, I like this video a lot. I mean, Xylostorm, I watch a lot of his, like, Elden Ring videos. I'm a very big fan of this kind of stuff. So, I think also it has some good conversations inside of it for gaming as a whole. So, I do like watching them and getting into that. What if a game's not for you, even if because of that disability? Well, no game is for everybody, right? That's just the way it goes. Difficulty is subject to change when talking with different people. Exactly. Yeah, unrealistic to expect every game to cater or care about every audience. Yeah, it's impossible to do that. And as an accessibility option for all games, it's called YouTube Long Plays. Well, there is that too. Yeah, you can just watch somebody else play the game. It's a lot easier to add a difficulty slider than to bring a new controller onto the market. Yeah, I think so too. But it's like with a lot of games, I think that with Elden Ring, if somebody beat Elden Ring or somebody beat like Dark Souls or Sekiro or whatever, they still had to solve the same problems that you did. It's not like somebody could just play the game on easy mode and then kill Melania, and then, you know, they have the same thing you did. And I think that's what makes it so fulfilling for people, is that it's like a universal pass-fail, and there's no easy mode for it, even though anybody who's actually played the game a lot knows that there is, but it doesn't function in the same dynamic, or the same, like, binary way, like easy, hard. I'll be right back.